hearing the story of one woman's amazing journey from Hungary, Budapest, Hungary, to Hollywood might give you some insight on what today's refugees might be experiencing. Her brave story, her amazing life are extremely inspiring. Her book is called From Budapest to Hollywood.
You are watching Profundo TV with host Phyllis Haynes.
It's not possible in this conversation to tell everyone everything in this rich story of yours. Let's talk about a little bit about the beginning. It is a very personal telling about your childhood, about your life. Um, I don't think everyone understands what it was like to be a child uh, during the period of the Nazi era. And you were in Hungary, Budapest.
I was good at being a child. I didn't give my mother too much trouble. I did give her some and riled her many times. But I was very lucky for having a brother who couple of years, 4 years older than I am, and he did guide me, and he has and still has a good sense of calmness about him, which I never did. I was always up and down the ceiling and trying to be seen but not heard. And then I was told that they don't want to see me either. So to me, getting into becoming a good student was a natural way to grow, although as it turned out in the long run, it was also a natural place for me to hide and be at my best without mixing it up with anything. And it was a place where I knew what I was doing and I had a voice. And back at my home, I did not have a voice. I was just a girl. And we had no, in those days, in the middle of the century, women in my country and in my family definitely had no voice.
Was it a time, were you aware of the threat of the Nazis that forced you and your family to leave Budapest? When did you become aware of that?
I was not aware of the Nazis anything because at the time of the Jewish ghetto that took place before the war ended, um, to me, wearing a yellow star and being marked didn't mean anything. I was a child and I just did what I was told. So I don't have an opinion of learning on that. I know that after my mother returned home and we became a bit of a family again, although my father never came back. After she came home and the communist life started, that I was very much aware of because they have a tendency of um, censorship. You know, it's there. You can't speak. Somebody will report that you said something, and you are very limited in what you can or cannot do. Definitely, there is no belief in God at any level. So your religion you had to practice secretly, and it was one of those things where I was aware of many things that were secret. So I wasn't free to just ask questions or speak up other than within my school system and my studies. So it was a very different childhood there.
You had a very rich childhood, and we will talk a little bit about that. But I do remember in the book you talk about your father being on a train to Siberia, that that he never came back. How did that happen? Do you think that was the Nazi regime? What is it that put him on the train to Siberia?
Well, no, it was not. That was my brother and I were messing around with our imagination because we didn't want to believe that our father died. And actually, somebody did come and told our mother that they saw his dead body on with a pile of other dead bodies on a border town on the western end of the country. So no, he was never. My brother, who refused to accept the fact that his father has passed away, imagined and told me that in his mind he did not die, and he probably got on the train and was taken by the Russians out to Siberia, which is what the Russians did after they won the war. Uh, they they didn't put them into concentration camps in Germany and Europe. They put them into some sort of labor camp in Siberia. Those were just secondhand stories that I picked up as a child. But my brother's idea was actually probably to make me feel better that our father will be coming back. But then at one time he said, no, he's probably got a new family there. And he played a fantasy thing to maintain himself because he could not imagine life without his father.
Right. And your father's life was taken because he was Jewish.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And killed and killed. Yeah.
And,
So
and
I would just
killed.
want to make that clear because, you know, I've read the book, you've written the book, but not everyone else can understand the story.
Yeah,
So,
he was, what
and
they
you were,
did, the Nazis were building concentration camps, and they were doing labor, and they used the Jews to do the labor, just like in Egypt. You know, they were doing the labor, and everybody was telling them what to do. And they were in labor camp, and they actually had furloughs, and they actually came back every so often to the family. In fact, I was the result of one of those visits when he was let out. But they were laboring around the clock. They were working very hard, building and railroads and whatever it is that they did. And he supposedly passed away of hunger. And the reason I remember that is because there was one man who, in our community, who claimed that he went to see all the Jewish labor campers, and my grandmother and my mother would bake cakes and bread and make him take it to them, thinking that our father will get some fresh food, which never happened because I understand he was just one skeleton among many.
you were also on the ship that took people from Europe through the Strait of Gibraltar. Talk about that. What was that like being on the ship Exodus?
Yeah. That one I remember very clearly. I was almost 5.5 or 6, so I was more aware of what was going on. My mother and my brother and I joined movement that was Zionist party movement, taking the orphans of Europe out of Europe and away into freedom, of which was still Palestine. It was not Israel at the time, but it was Israel. It was a Zionist movement, but it was all underground because it was a secret, and the British were still very powerful in all the Mediterranean and the Middle East, and so it was. They had several ships that they had acquired that were used, old freighter ships or whatever, in which they loaded us, and then we went from France, from Marseille, where our ship left from. And actually, there were 5 ships, and they all had a different name. But the one that we were on was called the Exodus, which is also the title that Leon Uris, the author, used in his book when he wrote the story. But his story was a composite of all those things, not any one ship. And my ship was very mean looking, and when in about 3 days or so that I understand the English did know that we were on that ship, that it was not a freighter, and no matter what kind of a flag it was flying, it was a real refugee ship. And so they got after us, and because our ship, it was run by volunteers from all over the world, Jewish war veterans or doctors or whatever. All the volunteers were the captain, and everybody was a volunteer of some knowledge, so they could all be functional on that ship. And the rest of them were 18 and 19-year-old kids who were adults compared to my 5 and 6-year-old buddies and myself. So the British came, and you could see them, the big, beautiful ships. They were the gunboats, those nice, that gray, steel looking boats.
Right, but more importantly to me, excuse me for interrupting you, but
Yeah.
what is really this part of the story that you write about is that you had to pretend until then that your mother was not your mother.
Yes.
In order for her to be able to come along on the voyage, you were okay to be there, but you had to pretend up until then that this was not your mother.
Yes.
Was that hard to do?
That was a very terrible thing for her, more so than for my brother and me. But because it was a movement to save the orphans of Europe, they didn't care very much about the adults. They were not included. So my mother somehow managed to talk them into letting her come on the staff. And as a result, she could at least see us and know that we're okay. But that nobody knew until we were on the ship that we were her natural children, because that was not allowed. It was not part of the basic model of the whole trip. But once they knew, it was a little bit better for me because she was more protective. But I knew her, but I wasn't allowed to let on. But I would hate to have been a mother in such a situation where your kids are running around and they not call you by your first name, and they're not acknowledged. But then by the time our ship, the Exodus, was shut up by the British, and we got tear gas and everything, and the holes were huge on the side of the ship where we were. And the tear gas was terrible, and my mother had the wet towels on our faces, and everybody around was gathering around my mother, who was the only adult in that area at that point. But she was a very tiny lady. She never got past 5 feet. So still she was the adult image, and everybody, all the kids actually looked up to her. And then we had to get off that ship just as soon as we reached Haifa dock, because the ship was sinking. And if you look at some of those photographs that is in the history books, and Wikipedia has it was Life magazine and all, the ship would have been sinking real quickly. And we got to the dock, and the single people or the young people did have the courage to jump in the water and swim across from the dock to the land, however far it is. And of course, my mother couldn't do it. And here I remember that because I was a little one, she was dragging me, and one of the British soldiers got off the ramp and picked me up and carried me back to the ramp. And now my mother and everybody was upset. Oh, I was kidnapped or something. But so my mother and my brothers were running after me, but he just picked me up and handed me up the ramp from one soldier to the other, because I was too little to walk. So they were being nice, but the condition didn't allow my mother to say thank you. It was not a good position for her to be in. But the terrible thing was that after we went through all this and she survived again, she was very scared because she heard about the Gibraltar having a camp, a refugee camp that's run by the British. And to her, being in another camp would have been death. And it was just a little bit of luck that our ship was returned. And for some political reason, it couldn't go around, couldn't go through Gibraltar, it couldn't go back to France. It had to go around to Germany, where the British had barracks and unused military facilities where they could stash us until almost, this was almost a year later, until Israel was determined that it became a state, and all the people who were waiting in this refugee camp were free to go to Israel and were taken to Israel. But by that time, my mother's mother sent us guide who actually smuggled my mother and my brother and me out of this camp. And we walked and then had a long way to go to one of the German trains. We were in Germany, we had to get on a train to go back to Hungary. And my mother had a ticket that this man had for her, but my brother had to stay in the bathroom when the conductor came. And I, because I was little, they put me on top of the luggage. You know how they have a big suitcase and a smaller one, and I was in the back as the third suitcase. So we got away with it, luckily. But it was a very nasty trip because we weren't supposed to be there. So as a child, having been in all these situations where we were never in control, and I was always quiet and I was always hidden and nobody was supposed to see me, it left its mark. And when we did get back to Hungary, I was not speaking Hungarian. I was not speaking anything. I was not in a good place for a while until they healed me, I guess. But I was still in my 6, not yet 7, when all this happened. But it did leave some marks.
Well, I think people have to read this book because you are a film writer. You are someone who can tell a story so that you really do, one can really experience a lot of what you were feeling. And I appreciate the look inside that part of your life. But let's jump ahead because we can't possibly do the entire book in this period. One of the things that I was struck by was that you've always had a kind of performance interest. You were an exquisite student of ballet, but you were not allowed to continue. Now, why weren't you allowed to continue ballet?
Oh, that was the most horrible thing that could happen, because I was a war baby, and babies who born during the war didn't get the right food and the right health from their parents. So my mother didn't make me perfect, and I had a problem with, they found a problem with my heart, and earlier there was a problem with my lungs. So by the time I was by the time I qualified to become a member of the children's corps de ballet in the Hungarian opera, which was like the end of the world, everything I would ever want, then we had to go into a medical checkup before they put us into the dormitories where we all lived. You didn't go home. When you are a kid, when you are a dancer, you don't go home. You live in a dormitory and you dance. And you study when you have to, but mostly you dance. And that was the life I wanted. And they determined that they're not going to take a chance, because if my heart becomes oversized, which was determined could be, that I'd be dead by 30. And of course, my mother wouldn't allow that to happen. So, and they wouldn't allow that to happen. But I was, again, devastated by this crush. It was the most horrible thing that could happen, because I have just discovered that there was something I loved and made me want to live and be happy. And now they took that away. So I was, it was probably my biggest disappointment as a child. But
But reading you, what I notice about you is that you adapt very well and you find new things. Despite this huge disappointment, you took an interest in gymnastics. You got to be very good at gymnastics. You didn't give up trying. And obviously
No.
you've lived past 30, so it must have been okay for you to do the gymnastics.
Yes, yes. The ballet is the most demanding sport, as it were, in on your body in every sense. There is nothing as demanding as that. So you have to be in very, very good shape and very healthy. But the gymnastics, I just fell into that accidentally. So this is why I always have to believe that there is a God up there who's guiding me, even though I'm not lucky. I am lucky in another form, because now I bounced into this gym where my brother was playing basketball, and the little girls were doing gymnastics on the other end. And the coach said, "You want to come and try?" And I figured, oh, I'm a ballerina. Why not? It can't be much problems. And sure enough, I was good at it. And I came back week after week. And by 9, I was competing. And I believe that there is nothing more educational or more of a guideline for a lifetime than being a serious athlete, because the discipline that is called for, you just don't stop until you are at your best. Even then, you don't stop because you still want to be better. So sports can create people.
And
And
it definitely, you took this kind of discipline. Now, what brought you, now we have to get this really compact. So you wind up in the United States and in your young life. What made you come to America? What was it that got you here?
that was a fluke too, because my brother, right after the revolution, there was a revolution in 1956 that the Russians had crushed, and my brother, who was a university student by that time, was among all those that they were collecting the Hungarian Nazi soldiers were coming in the middle of the night to gather all the students, because they wanted to make sure that anybody who was responsible for the revolution gets killed. So my brother and a couple of 3 of his friends got together with their parents, of course, and got enough money, and my mother sold furniture of ours and all to get out of the country. So he was out of Hungary in Austria in the first week after the revolution was quelled. But my mother and I didn't go because she was worried that if he has to come back, he needs a place to live. But a few weeks later, she found out that he was okay, and now we had to go after him. And now we had another escape story, leaving the communist country. And my mother was working in a food packaging factory, and she could get a pass to leave Budapest, and on behalf with a false pass on behalf of the factory to go leave the city and bring food into the city. So we now had to go on a bus, on a truck, a produce truck, and pay off all the people who will little by little take us to the border. And then, of course, going across the border was another horrible thing, because it was in the middle of the night. It was a full moon. The snow was up to our knees because we were both tiny people. And she gave up about halfway before we reached the forest where the Red Cross was waiting. So she laid down in the snow with the bags and said, "You have to leave me. Just go and meet your brother," and all that. And this is where it comes in handy that teenagers are nasty, because I said to her that I can't carry 4 bags. You just have to bring the 2, and I'll take the 2. But then I did get her up, and I did drag her across to the forest. But what did happen, another defining moment, is she did give up in many, many ways. And now I was the head of the family in a form. and so to speak, because she was not a leader anymore. And those things you don't realize at the time because you just do what has to be done. That's what sports can do for you. Whatever needs to be done will be done, and you will finish up the best way possible. And that guided me throughout my entire life. And
So we were talking
that,
about what got you to the United States. So what happened once you reached the Red Cross?
so my mother was sure that my brother is on his way to Israel, but it turned out that he connected. My mother had a cousin in Chicago, and my brother got a $5 bill from him, and he said, "Don't go to Israel. You come to America and make the money, and then go to Israel." So we didn't know until sometime later that he was on a big boat coming across the ocean to the United States. But my mother and I had a long wait in a refugee camp in New Jersey, because no, Kornburg, that was not New Jersey. Hello, that was in Austria, outside Vienna, and that was refugee camps are, pretty horrible. But again, it had to be done. We couldn't go anywhere, and then the good news was that's when I understand that John F. Kennedy, he introduced a bill that would bring the direct blood relatives into the country, because the United States couldn't carry all the refugees and pick them all up from Europe, but at least those who have blood relatives could come. And that's when we got lucky that my brother was already here. And so we could come shortly after that. And we went to Toledo, Ohio, where my mother's cousin actually moved. But he was a doctor, and he sponsored us. He signed for us that we would. The sponsoring didn't mean anything other than he signed for us that we're not going to be a ward of the state. And sure enough, he got us everything that needed to be done for a refugee to get the green card and the Social Security and go to night school. We were in night school for English 2 weeks after we got here. So yes, it was very important to be in this country and assimilate. And I was in a big hurry to do that. I liked everything about being here. My mother was sick, and she stayed sick the rest of her life. But I was a happy camper. This was a great place to be.
So does that give you any insight into what refugees are experiencing today? People who are trapped in places and also trying to get into this country. Does it give you any feeling or
Yes.
thoughts about that?
It gives me an insight that I know that being a refugee is very, very difficult and a lot of work, but not following the rules makes it worse for you, for the refugee, because you're going to alienate people. And we knew that we follow the rules, and we're going to learn everything and take care of ourselves. But that's the hardest thing, because we come from another place, we have different laws and different everything, but we have to follow the rules of this country because we are new here and we don't know how they do things. So I can't compare this to what's going on right now as we speak with the illegal refugees coming into town. And I feel personally that we have to take care of everybody who doesn't follow the rules. And if they follow the rules, they could get here, just do it the right way. So that's too political, I don't think.
I understand. So one of the things I want to say about you is that you are not only following rules, but you figured out Hollywood pretty well. You got over to California and you figured out how to move up the ranks as an agent, as a talent agent and a casting director, and then a writer. What can you say about yourself? What is it that how would you describe your gutsiness or your cleverness in Hollywood? I mean, that's not an easy place to be. So
I think I got lucky because ignorance is bliss. This was one of those moments where knowing nothing, just following your own logic was all I had. I was working instinctively. I found out from my husband, who was an aspiring actor, that they needed an agent. Well, where is your agent? What's an agent? So I was told what an agent was, and I said, I can do that, because I was the kind of wife that comes from the kind of world where you do everything your husband needs. And you're supporting your husband. You are number two. He is number one. He is the man of the house. So it's a very strange mentality that I was raised with, but that's what made me become an agent, because now I passed all the tests, and I opened a little office of my own. But I didn't know until much later that people who are agents, they have been training, they have been secretaries to agents, they have been in the industry one way or the other. So they didn't just walk in here and say, well, here I am, I'm an agent. So I was a bit of a laughing stock that, again, I was too ignorant to know that. And I was young, and my English was broken English, and I carried my little briefcase with my 14 actors' pictures, and I went after a part that I read, and I followed, and I went after directors, and I went to producers' offices without really knowing that maybe that's not exactly the way to go. But I knew that a casting director is not going to give me the reading for my clients, only the director, or the, not even a writer. The director, the producer would do that. So I got to know those people. Again, I got in there because I was weird. They were curious. They were wondering if I'm for real, I suppose. I don't know.
But more importantly, you succeeded. You actually got jobs for people.
Oh, James McKeechan.
Ah,
You're talking
yes.
about Tenafly. He did the show Tenafly, and he was a wonderful actor. And I got him. There was a movie called Claudine, where James Earl Jones and who was a beautiful maybe I can't think of her name.
That's okay.
Julia.
But your client did well, right?
He did very well. And Nick Nolte, I feel responsible for putting him on the map, because the agency where I ended up being wouldn't sign anybody unless all of us agreed on signing that actor, because we all had to push the same people. And so Nick was doing a play, and everybody went to see it. It was a very famous play, and I had to go and see it, and I was just very impressed with him, as everybody else. And the next Monday, I was at the studio, and I'm reading a script, and it turns out that the leading character is just right for Nick. So I went to the producer. Now, at that time, I was helped a little bit because everybody had seen that play, William Inge. It was the last pad. It was I think it was the last work Inge has written. And so everybody knew exactly who he was. So I got the reading for him in 2 minutes. And after that, my biggest problem was that he had scheduling conflicts, because everybody wanted to use him, because he was really, really terrific in those first couple of years of his acting career. He was amazing.
Well, now, again, people have to read your book to get all the details, but let's go to another part, which is the fact that you also started writing screenplays. You started writing.
Oh, yeah.
So what made you do that? What made you do that?
This will take a bit additional imagination, because when I started to read the scripts as an agent, I was reading, several a day, and it's like the lights came on. I was the camera. I could understand everything about those scripts, and it's a very difficult form of writing, but it was just, that's when I knew that was my thing. And within no time, I was taking a course at UCLA in screenwriting, because now that I knew I wanted to write, I wanted to learn how. So it was sort of backwards. but I was already involved with a couple of jobs because I knew the producers, so I could go and give them story ideas, and I got paid for that. And so I got into the Writers Guild, and now I could go to all those meetings and meet more producers and directors. And I just, I did what I saw all the other agents do. Now I couldn't, buy them a bottle of wine because I didn't have that kind of money, but I could be interesting, and I could ask good questions. And what's amazing, and this is where I learned about, if you admire somebody and let them know that there's something they did or do that's really fascinating, they'll talk about it for days. They like to talk about what they like. So I just had to learn the good questions.
Which you did. Now, we're not going to get into the politics of this, but you also got to meet Harvey Weinstein.
But that was the last. I didn't actually. I knew him. I didn't meet him. I was there before Harvey was there. I'm just. I just know that he was caught because the Me Too and the sexual disrespect was going on way before Harvey. He's just the unlucky one who got caught. There were several producers, television, radio, anybody. See, that's the logic of the business. It's the logic of any high gloss business, because there's somebody with big power and somebody who wants to be inside. And the person who wants to be inside will do anything to get inside. And you can count on that. That is not going to change. It may be a negative outlook on Hollywood, but that is not going to change. I know a young man, 18-year-old young man who came to town from Nebraska or Wyoming, and he wanted to play the guitar. And I think he was overdosed in less than a year. He went into, he got caught as the, I think, a roommate of somebody who abused him. And that was going on. And my big story was another producer quite a bit before, Marty Ransohoff. You probably wouldn't remember him. I think his biggest fame was claim to fame was the ice station Zebra with Rock Hudson. That was a wonderful movie. He was a big filmmaker.
Well, before we talk about him, I want to encourage people. I'm going to leave them with a cliffhanger. I want to encourage people to read your book and learn all about how you moved from Budapest to Hollywood. It is quite a story. I think it could be even another movie